Welcome to The Paradigm Shift on 4ZZZ 102.1, where we challenge the assumptions of our current society to resist oppression and investigate alternative ways of living, for a world based on justice, solidarity and sustainability. Welcome to The Paradigm Shift on 4ZZZ 102.1 FM, your local community radio station. My name is Andy and I will be here for the next hour, and we are broadcasting on Yagara and Turrbal country. And today on the show, we're going to be speaking to a voice that many of you will recognise because he's been prominent in this country for a long time, standing up for nature. He was for a long time in the Tasmanian Parliament and the Federal Senate. He's written a new book. It is Bob Brown. He was the leader of the Greens for a long time. Since retiring from that, he has been still fighting for nature, mostly down in Tassie with the Bob Brown Foundation, doing a lot to protect the forests of Takaina, and also they're dealing with salmon fish farming now, and the latest campaign is about krill fishing in the Antarctic. But they're involved all over the place, actually. And Bob's written a new book called Defiance that is largely about the need for non-violent civil disobedience type action that goes beyond just the participation in our process of democracy, which for a long time, of course, he did, but getting out there, using our physical bodies to protect nature, but also to engage with a long history of people-powered movements and how they create change when our system of parliament is, of course, so caught up in vested interests of extractive industries. And that's what we are mostly going to talk about with Bob, so let's have a listen.
Yeah, g'day, I'm Bob Brown. I was in the Senate for 16 years, and before that for 10 years in the Tasmanian lower house as the first Greens in that parliament, a Greens member, and I'm an environmentalist. I was originally a medical practitioner, and I'm still doing that because protecting the environment is preventative medicine. Looking after the environment is looking after the mental health of we human beings who come out of the natural environment of this planet. But the world's in great trouble, and it's up to us to fix it. And that's what this book is about, really, is defying the forces that are wrecking the world so that we get back into a safe and respectful relationship with this planet and hand it on to our kids, the better, not the worse, for us being here.
Yes, your political involvement has had many facets over the years, and the latest is this new book, Defiance. Can you tell us what inspired you to write this book?
Well, it's about 70 stories about environmental activists and activism and the environment itself. But it looks at the causes, which is the corporate takeover of parliaments and governments, whether they be autocracies and democracies around the world. And we see that here in Australia at the very moment, actually, where the Minister for the Environment, appointed Murray Watt, handpicked by Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, has got the Business Council of Australia and the Minerals Council, the miners, in with him discussing the new environment laws for the country. But activist environmental organisations like my foundation locked out. Murray Watt's written to us saying he doesn't have time to meet us. And that's a very clear indication of the way the world is malfunctioning and will continue whenever we have Labor or coalition governments, because they have been corporatised. They've been taken over by the corporations. There's 780 lobbyists in Canberra. Most of them are there for self-interest, not for the good of society. There's 80,000 lobbyists in Washington for everything from armaments to coal to oil, and really it's just the greed brigade in charge, and we've got to turn that around. And we can do that in many ways. But Andy, at the last federal election, 70% of Australians still voted for the old parties who are doing the bidding of those corporations. And I think we'll see an increase in that vote away from the old parties. But it's strange that 70 or 80% of Australians want native forest logging ended altogether in New South Wales and Tasmania, and yet a majority of those people voted for more logging and for more coal mines and more gas fracking when they voted for Labor, Liberal and the National parties at the last election. So it's not until the people themselves, ourselves, put the environment up, give it the importance that it has, because it underlays everything we do in life, that we'll see that turn around. And I have a feeling with this book, I've had 14 conversations around the eastern states of Australia, and we'll be going to Western Australia in the new year. And there's a great feeling of anger and frustration about what's happening with the environment, but it must translate into people taking action. And as I say in one of the chapters of the book, when you get 3 or 5% of people taking action with an idea whose time has come, and surely the idea of protecting this planet from further destruction has come, it's well and truly come, then we will see governments change and policies change and corporations put back in their box. And I've got a whole chapter in that book about American presidents warning, really since the country set up, about the takeover of corporations taking over and stealing the power of democracy from the people. And that's just what's happened, and we've got to turn that around. And it's easy, it would be easy policy to do that, but not yet. It hasn't happened yet. And this book really is an appeal to everybody to get active in their own way, not just through the ballot box, but by taking peaceful direct action when the law is wrong and the laws of nature are being infringed, to protect what we have left of wildlife and forests and deserts and beaches and coral reefs in this country of ours, in an age where climate change is the greatest overarching threat to the environment, but can't be dealt with by our Minister for the Environment, and that will, if Murray Watt gets his way, will be banned from consideration by future ministers for the environment. That's absurd.
I guess the word defiance can mean many different things, and people would interpret it in their own way, but it seems that for you in this book, what you want to talk about is a specific tactic of non-violent civil disobedience. Is that the kind of defiance that you're trying to bring out?
Well, Andy, it's of course not for everybody, and I had a woman in Hobart quite recently say to me, I don't want to sit in front of bulldozers, but could I take the people who are a bowl of soup? And I said, that's a fantastic idea, because each in our own way. But when it comes to peaceful direct action, that's been undertaken by people Christ turned up the tables of the businessmen outside the temple and paid for that way back. But it's been going right down through the ages, and I quote in one of those essays Martin Luther King, who was writing from Birmingham jail, where he'd been arrested for protesting against racism in the United States. And he's writing to say that he thinks the worst thing is not the Ku Klux Klan and the people who are violently opposed to their peaceful protests, but those who sit back and say, oh, you shouldn't be breaking the law, you shouldn't be protesting, you should be nice, and get run over. And he particularly names his fellow Christian and Jewish clergy there as not wanting to break the traces or to peacefully stand up. And he's right about that. You know, when the laws of nature are being broken and we're destroying this livability on this planet, we have to stand up against it. And, you know, since I wrote that book, Andy, the authorities of the United Kingdom actuaries, these are people who look carefully at risk, and Exeter University, which is a centre of excellence on climate change, have said that if we pass some of the worst tipping points, and we've already crossed a couple of those, and the planet continues to heat to 2 degrees by 2050, that's just 25 years from now, and we'll go well over 2 degrees by then on current estimates, and look at the Liberals throwing away even the poor target of net zero by 2050, then if the worst happens, there'll be 2 billion, B for billion people dead, and a 25% collapse in the global economy by 2050. Now, is that what Australian voters are backing when they vote for more of the same or worse, as they're doing at the moment? We've got to accept responsibility. Everybody's got to accept responsibility, and that includes people who want to do nothing. My dad was a police constable in New South Wales, and he taught us very early on that if you see a crime happening and you don't do anything about it, you become part of the problem. Well, a crime is happening here on a global scale, with 70% of the world's wildlife having been destroyed in just my lifetime, and the rate of destruction increasing, and most people are anaesthetised. They don't want to know about it. They want to keep voting Labor or Coalition, which is a prescription for more destruction. So it's really, the book Defiance is also one of many books being written at the moment, and tracts being written, warning people that if we don't do something about this, there's going to be very, very dire consequences. So, and getting involved and taking action and campaigning against those who want more coal mines and gas fracking and burning forests is enjoyable. And I quote in there the people who have come to the defence of Tarkina, the greatest temperate rainforest in Australia, in northwestern Tasmania, and where over 100 people have been arrested, and that includes footballers and doctors and nurses and artists and singers and so on. And they all come back and say, we're so glad we did that, as do people who were involved in the Franklin campaign way back. It's not a dreadful, life-destroying thing. It makes you feel like you've done something worthwhile, and people come out of it feeling the better, not the worse, for having taken some action.
I think a lot of people probably associate defiance with a particular emotion of like anger, and maybe a particular personality that's kind of angry. But it's interesting because you have never seemed to be a person who is particularly angry by nature. So I wonder how you find the balance there between what you see as the need for defiance to protect our planet with maybe it not being your natural inclination.
Well, in a way it is, Andy, because we're all got similar characteristics, and I spent 10 years depressed as a youngster during the Cold War, thinking about how hopeless and absurd humanity is. But I found at the end of all that being optimistic and being active for a better world is a much better place to have oneself be, feel much better about it. And I get lots of young people in particular, old people as well, but young people in particular coming up and saying, Bob, why aren't you angry? Well, of course, who wouldn't be angry about what's going on at the moment? But it's a trap to suppress that anger and do nothing about it. Then you get depressed. It's much better to take action as a consequence of that distress about what's going on the planet. And so time and time again, and this is what the book Defiance is about, it's about taking action for one's own well-being as well as that of the planet, and taking on the bullies and the charlatans and the billionaires who are running this planet into great chaos. And, we're in a country where we're much safer to do that. I've got a chapter in there about all the environmentalists who are murdered elsewhere in the world. Good, wonderful, lovely people just for standing up for the environment. That doesn't happen by and large here in Australia. Sure, we get vilified and you get threatened and so on, but the self-vilification and threat of knowing you did nothing when we could rescue this planet and all life on it and the interest of our children as well as our fellow creatures by taking some action is much more rewarding. So I think people have got to not wear a hair shirt, not punish themselves because the world's going in the wrong direction. We've got to do better than that and be sensible about it. We're living in a materialist society. We can't completely hog-tie ourselves by self-restriction. For example, here I am flying to venues on the mainland about this book, and I worry about the greenhouse gases going over the back of those planes. And I'm very well aware that the answer to that is to save the forests, is to protect the oceans, is to stop the destruction of species. And you can't do that by making yourself perfect in the meantime. And of course, we know from long experience that the destroyers know they can't win the environment argument. It's already, the public is convinced we should protect the environment. So they have to take out environmentalists, and they do so by personal vilification and by getting weak-spined parliamentarians to pass laws jailing people for taking peaceful action on the environment. And so you really, here you are, you're talking to a convicted criminal, if you like, for standing, that's me, for standing in front of trees which had nesting swift parrots in them, these critically endangered, fastest parrots on the planet, and they're logging the trees in which they nest. And no wonder. They've gone from tens of thousands down to 700 now, and it's predicted that there'll be 70 left by 2030, and then extinction. And so our foundation is standing up against that. And I tell you, the feeling's good. And I'll be appealing that conviction in the federal court, in the Supreme Court rather, in Tasmania in March with two other women who were there and were also arrested at the time. But this isn't a matter of our own personal dignity or our own personal well-being. We're committed to non-violence, unlike the corporations who have no trouble calling in armies where they're putting mines in around the world to gun down peasants or to take out lawyers who are trying to protect the environment. But we have to understand that they do have the guns and the tanks, but they don't have a good antidote to our non-violence, and nor do they have the populace with them. And it's our job to get the population as a whole, that's everybody, who's concerned about the environment, to be active about it.
I'm interested about your experience in Parliament, where you were for a long time and in the Senate. And I guess in that kind of party politics, there's a real need for pragmatism and for compromise at times. And I wonder how that fit with your deeply felt need for defiance.
Well, at the end of the day, I'm a great supporter of democracy because, as Winston Churchill said in 1947, it's still the best form of government, warts and all, against everything else you can look at. And at the moment we have a plutocracy that's ruled by the rich, and they've got the big parties in their keeping, you know, and we're seeing that through the passage of these new laws in the federal parliament at the moment. Now, however, democracy is also the answer to getting the environment protected. And for me, it was a great privilege to spend years in the Tasmanian Parliament and then in the Australian Senate, fighting for both social justice and for the environment. And I think the more people who get involved in that, the better. And thank God we've got the Greens and the Independents, those who are going to stand up for it and not just waive these current laws that Murray Watt and Anthony Albanese with the Business Council of Australia are trying to ram through the Australian Parliament. I'll be going to the Senate inquiry to talk about the need for real environment laws, not those written by the corporations. But it's great being in a parliament when you know you have got public backing. And go right back to Graham Richardson, perhaps the strongest environment minister we've ever had for all his foibles, who said to me and to others who wanted him to protect the Tasmanian forest, I can't hear the crowd roaring. So it's really up to us to get the crowd roaring, if you like, so that politicians can take the action they need to take.
I think there's an interesting aspect to that kind of defiance that you talk about that a lot of people might not know about, and that's the way that environmental NGOs have been intentionally hobbled by the government to restrict them from taking that kind of non-violent direct action that you're talking about. And it's sort of in the face of that you set up your organisation, the Bob Brown Foundation, in opposition to that, to specifically do that kind of action. And so I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on, I guess, that kind of situation with NGOs and why you've done yours the way that you have.
Well, when I came out of the Senate, I wanted to be, or to continue being an active environmentalist, and setting up a new organisation seemed to be the way to go, and other people advised me that would be a good thing. And so we set up with a clean sheet to take peaceful direct action for the environment. But, everybody for their own. And the question to all environmental organisations is what we're doing actually protecting the environment? And everybody has to answer that for themselves. It's the same with donors. Our organisation's growing quickly, Andy, and we now have 30 full-time employees. That's from a standing start of nothing, because people like to see action being taken. And that's the way of the future. It's not going to be by being complacent, and it's not going to be by being compliant, and it's not going to be by seeing a Minister for the Environment who doesn't want to talk to environmental people who are action-oriented. It's going to be through standing up to the brutes who are destroying this planet and calling them out. And that includes politicians who are subservient to those brutes. And when I say brutes, I'm talking about brutal big corporations who want to override public sentiment to destroy environments to make a quick profit. And that's the rule of the world at the moment, and we've got to change that. So they have no antidote except, as I said, to get weak-spined Labor and coalition governments to pass laws against environmental action. These brutes have no other answer to public insurrection, and it's going to get bigger. I feel it in the air now everywhere I go. In talking about this book, as I say, there's a lot of anger and people wanting to know what to do about it. and everybody's got to do what they can in their own way, and that includes donors giving to activist organisations. It's incredibly important, because the money becomes then used to take on directly the destruction of the environment, and that's incredibly important. We saw that with, of course, Sea Shepherd taking on the whaling in the Southern Ocean, and for a time there, Paul Watson, who was heading up Sea Shepherd, was made a global criminal by the Japanese whalers, and he was on red alert, so he could be arrested in any country, including Australia, that he happened to go to. Well, now it's been found by the International Court of Justice that the whalers were actually the criminals. The whaling's been stopped, and they've only just lifted that red alert off Paul Watson and his actions. But there's now hundreds, if not thousands, of whales moving in our oceans and delighting people right up the eastern coast of Australia, because he and Sea Shepherd did take that action. And, what a good feeling for all those people. And one of the people who was aboard those ships was Alistair Allen, who's now our activist in charge, campaigner in charge of trying to protect not just Antarctica and end the krill fishing down there, which is stealing the food out of the mouths of penguins and whales and seals, but is campaigning to bring to order this destructive Atlantic salmon fishing industry in Tasmania, which, having seen the death of thousands of Atlantic salmon and pieces of rotting fish washing up on beaches around southern Tasmania last summer, is now putting a massive amount of antibiotics into their cages to try and prevent infection, authorised by the federal government, enhanced by the state government, and they've just closed down the rock lobster fishery, commercial fishery in Tasmania, right in the window, on the seas in the window I'm looking out at the moment. There's the fish farms polluting the ocean, multinational corporations behind all of them, and the local fishery shut down. Now, what does that say about Labor and Liberal parties supporting that overseas-owned industry against the interest of the local fishermen, let alone the local recreational fishers and people whose livelihoods around these ocean places is being harmed by that industry, which should be brought out of the ocean and put on land, as it is in British Columbia and elsewhere around the world.
Yeah, it's ever expanding, isn't it? Being an activist, the number of issues that you need to take on, and you just started out wanting to protect a wild river, and then it went on to being forests, and now you're fighting for krill in the Antarctic.
Yes, but it's all part of the same system. You know, this world, everything is attached to everything, and we've got one big global ecosystem, and the biggest threat we're presenting to it is burning more coal and gas and forests, and we've got a government that's got its foot on the accelerator doing just that. That's a Labor government which believes in social justice. But, you know, everybody knows in this country our insurance policies are going up rapidly. That's because of floods and fires. That's because of climate change. That's because of oil and gas. That's because of the Labor Party and the Liberal Party and the National Party. So we've got to understand that this is not just a quaint piece of environmentalism. In the real world, this is going to drag down, and is dragging down, the economy with it. And we've already seen billions of dollars damage done to the Australian economy through these massive storms and fires and floods. And every Australian's paying for it already. And as I said earlier, global authorities think that there could be a 25% collapse in the global economy in the next few decades if we don't change course. And what's happening in Canberra and in Brisbane and in Hobart? They're putting their foot on the accelerator of climate change, species extinction, and destruction of nature. It's as if there's a certain amount of madness. It's really irresponsibility has taken over here, and it's up to us, we the people, to turn that around. And I love being part of the direct action and the public campaigning that's taking place. And it's like the 1960s. There's a feeling in the air of people getting past anger and feeling bad about it and wanting to do something about it. And I think we'll see great changes in the coming years, including a rollback of that vote for the big parties at the next federal election.
Now, your previous book before Defiance was titled Optimism, which I guess in the world that you've described is not always an easy trait to hold on to. Do you want to tell us, I guess, how we can hold on to optimism even when it seems so many things are going wrong?
Well, it's just like being optimistic about a sandwich shop. If you're opening that and you're pessimistic and you're telling people you don't think you'll do well, they're not likely to come back. Optimism is a great motivator, and I see in every human being a wish to protect nature. And the time has come where that feeling in human beings right around the planet can convert into actually protecting nature. So I think the wave of feeling in people and populaces and 8 billion people around the planet is going in the right direction. The question is it going fast enough? Not at the moment, and our job is to make it go faster. So it will turn things around while we've got the opportunity to do that. And if I had a third book, Andy, and I think this might be my last long-written book. It would be about kindness. So we'd have optimism, defiance, and kindness. They're three good touch words for how we should behave on this planet. But by being kind doesn't mean being weak. It doesn't mean just having to be deferential and tugging our forelock to the Elon Musks and the Donald Trumps and the Xi Jinpings and the Modis and the bigwigs of the world, let alone those in this country. And I've got a chapter there about Rupert Murdoch. It really means us standing up for what we believe in, rather than being deferential to other people who see the world just as a money-making operation. Very hopeful about that. There is a change in the air. It's coming for young people as well as old, and I think it's got a long way to go yet, and we'll see. But we're going in the right direction, and I'm very optimistic about that.
Well, thanks very much, Bob, for chatting with us today, and thanks for all your hard work over the years protecting our planet.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you for helping get the message out there. There's a lot we can do and a lot we can look forward to. So thank you, Andy.
That is Bob Brown there talking about his book Defiance and the continuing need to take strong action to protect our planet from those who would destroy it just to make a few bucks. And of course, you can get that book if you want to read more. Then you can get it at your local bookshop probably, or I'm sure you can get it online if that's your preferred way to get your reading material, or the library. I do recommend libraries. I don't know if the Brisbane libraries have it, but they get a lot of new books all the time, but has just come out. And I thought I'd give a plug as well for people that are out there doing direct action for our planet. And of course, it goes on all the time around this country. There's so many people that are passionate, that are willing to endure the physical discomfort that sometimes comes with doing those kinds of actions, and that are part of a community that is able to support them to do it. And so this week in the Central Highlands of Tasmania, somebody locked on to the logging road. I'm looking at a picture now. I'm not sure how they're locked on, actually. He's just sitting there on the road, but I think maybe they've dug a dragon into the road and concreted in something and then locked his arm to it. And that's a fella called Anthony Houston, who has done that. Fastest clearing of native forest in Tasmania is there in the Central Highlands, and so that's an action there. And there was another one in New South Wales where a person called Micah Weeks locked himself to a logging machine, the log picker, and he's locked on there, Micah, in the Styx River, which is near Ebor in New South Wales, which is an amazing, beautiful, mountainous part of New South Wales. And, of course, they did have a big win protecting New South Wales forests this year with the Koala National Park finally, after being promised many years ago. Finally, the logging stopped and it got made into National Park. But, of course, there's so much that's not protected. And so good on you, Micah Weeks, for locking on to that log picker with an elbow lock. And yeah, it's happening all the time, and every person that does it, there's a bit less cleared that day, a bit less environmental destruction that day, and a bit more resistance for those who just want to go out there and do it and make a few bucks. They don't need the complications. Of course, native forest logging doesn't make any money anyway. It runs on government subsidies. So it's the other side of it is that it's part of a campaign that shows that strong political will that will try to win those decisions, ultimately political decisions that can stop things like native forest logging, and that we've got so much work to do to protect our environment with so many different issues of course, climate change is a huge one, but also loss of biodiversity and species extinction and on, all the different things that are coming from our never-ending extraction of the natural ecosystem around us, our never-ending plundering. And I'll see you next week.